Hey y'all, my name is Razia, and this is Inspiring the Ideals podcast. This podcast is sponsored by A Legacy Beyond Legendary with the intent to raise awareness. Inspiring the Ideals was created in 2017 with the hopes to dismantle the conception of competition, increase self-esteem, positive mindset challenges, and transparency within young Black women. Again, my name is Razia. Welcome. I am an aspiring transformational speaker, entrepreneur of A Legacy Beyond Legendary, and founder of Kappa Epsilon Eta Nu. Our goal with Inspiring the Ideals is to promote self-love, self-esteem, and woman empowerment. We are striving to dismantle jealousy, competition, and confrontation amongst young women. With a variety of topics, we hope to strike conversations that many try to avoid with the intent to raise awareness. Hey y'all, I am back with another episode. This is episode 8, and today I want to talk about setting boundaries, taking control over your life, letting people know, including yourself, what you will and will not tolerate, but setting those boundaries for yourself, creating self-care, creating an environment for yourself where you feel comfortable doing something or saying something, where you feel comfortable basically just being you. Okay, so I want to just first start with a couple of steps for kind of figuring out what those boundaries are, or figuring out what you need to make boundaries for. Okay, so I think the first thing that we all should do is identify the problem. What is causing this chaos in our lives where we feel like we need a boundary? Is it a friendship? Is it the workplace? Is it something in your work that's causing the stress? Is it a relationship? Is it yourself? Like, these are things that we really need to figure out first before we could go anywhere. In understanding the problem. Like, if a friendship is creating this massive chaos in your life where you feel like you've gone too far, we need to create boundaries, you need to understand what problem it is you're creating a boundary for. I think that's really important, because if you go into making rules and setting standards blindly without knowing where to go, you end up falling back. Now you have to start all over again. So really identifying the problem and understanding the problem. Understanding why you need those boundaries in the first place. So, it kind of goes hands in hand with understanding the problem, but you need to understand what the problem is and understand why you need this boundary. Is it causing you to be depressed? Is it causing you self-harm? Things in that nature. Like, it's really important to really reflect, really give yourself that time to think about your next steps. Being straightforward. Once you thought about it, once you understood it, once you identify it, be straightforward. Don't try to sugarcoat it. Don't try to downplay what you need for yourself. Because once you start doing that, you create gaps in that boundary that you're trying to create. Okay, so be straightforward. Let your friend know. Let your relationship know. Let your coworker know what it is that you need, and be straightforward. Be extremely blunt with it. And they should be able to understand. Like, you could be blunt and you could be respectful at the same time. So definitely be straightforward, because we're talking about a self-care or a self-nurturing act for yourself. So be straightforward. Address it early. So if you are in the workplace and it's a intense moment between you and a coworker and they're crossing lines that you feel they should not be crossing, address it early. Don't wait. Don't brush it off your shoulder hoping that behaviors will change. Don't do that. Address it right then and there. If you need to take that time again to identify what the actual problem is, take that time, but don't take months and years to address the coworker. Take a couple of days, understand the problem, identify the problem, identify why you need that boundary with your coworker, and then you come back a day or two later and you address it as early as possible. All right. Also, trusting yourself. Don't second guess yourself. Don't try. It kind of goes back to, being straightforward. Don't downplay how you feel. If you feel that your friendship with someone has came its course, or you feel like that friend is crossing a boundary that they should not be crossing, you got to trust your first instinct. Trust your gut feeling, because once you start second guessing yourself, again, you create that gap in a boundary that you're trying to set. So trust your first instinct, and once you have that instinct, again, address it right away. I think that's really important for setting boundaries. Okay. Another thing with setting boundaries is, I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier in the introduction, but what are the things that you will and will not tolerate? So I guess this could really work for, friendships or workplaces. I was thinking more kind of like in a relationship or in a dating situation. But again, you can apply this to anything. But what are the things that you will not tolerate? What are the things that you will tolerate? If it's one of those instances where you need to do like a pros and cons, do that. But put your limits on paper. Write it down. These is the things that I'm going to tolerate. It's fine. It's not that big a deal. I'm just being picky. And then I'm not tolerating this at all. There is no compromising with it. And then that's where that boundary becomes like, there is no in between. Once you hit these negative marks, okay, we're done. Be self-aware and know who you are. I feel like this is another really important point, because if you don't know who you are, if you are kind of all over the place and still finding yourself, it will become hard for you to create those boundaries. It will be hard for you to understand what the problem is, because you don't necessarily know yourself. Personally, I feel like if you don't necessarily know who you are, you can't begin to create boundaries, because you don't know what boundaries you're creating. And what I mean by that is, one day or 1 week or 1 month, you could be feeling some kind of way, and then that next week or that next month, it's a completely different you. So you don't necessarily know who you are yet, because you're still trying to balance yourself. You're still trying to find yourself. So 1 week, you could be completely fine with someone treating you a certain type of way, and the next week, it's a complete problem. And I feel like you don't necessarily know yourself all the way yet. And I feel like once you know who you are, you have a sense of consistency, all year round. Like, I'm not tolerating this, get out my face, So it's really important. And that could be an episode within itself. But taking the time to understand you, taking the time to shut down social media, turn your phone off, just taking that time to really understand who you are as a person can be extremely important when creating boundaries. And then practicing self-care. I think I mentioned self-care in almost all of my episodes, but it is really important, because again, if you cannot control your emotions, if you cannot control who you are, how can you begin to create a boundary with someone, understand a problem with someone? Like, you can't do that if you're not fully aware of who you are. So again, it's take that time to figure out what are the things that you will and will not tolerate, and then go from there. Having self-control, you just have to have self-control when it comes to setting boundaries, whether it is in the workplace, whether it is in a friendship or a relationship, and whether you need to create boundaries within yourself. That could be another stepping stone of self-care and knowing who you are, knowing when you get in the way of yourself. Like, if you're getting in the way of you, that's a problem, and it's a boundary that you need to create. All right. So some examples of maybe creating this change is you can make sure that your values match what you're trying to create in a boundary. So if you value honesty, or if you value someone who is open-minded, make sure that your values match the boundaries that you are trying to create in your friendships. Not necessarily ultimatums, but if you value someone who is trustworthy, making a boundary where you have a safe space for your friends to be honest, could be really important, or really important in that friendship, I should say. So make sure your values match the boundaries that you're setting. Also, know your consequences. What are some consequences of breaking a boundary? If someone pushes or challenges those boundaries, what is your retaliation? What are you going to do? It goes back to being straightforward. Like, you have to be straightforward and blunt. If someone is, challenging the boundaries that you're trying to create for yourself, for your peace of mind, what are you going to do about it? Like, you need to know right then and there, you're not going to tolerate it. That should be on your do not tolerate list, okay? And then also really focus on behavior, and then focus on the words. It's not necessarily one or the other. It's not behavior and not words. It's not words and not behavior. It's both. But I feel like you need to focus on the behavior first. If you're setting boundaries with someone, they need to show you consistency in their behaviors and respect the boundaries that you're trying to create. Even with yourself, you need to have the behavioral aspects within yourself before you can, kind of go forward with the words that you tell yourself about what you're trying to do and how you're trying to elevate yourself. So again, just creating that change in relationships, like I said, whether it is in the workplace, friendship, relationship, or within yourself, creating that change and realizing that you are your main priority. So when setting boundaries, keep that in mind. Like, yourself is your priority. You have to know yourself to create change. You have to know yourself to create boundaries. And I just think it's a really good, concept to really keep in mind going forward. Okay. So thank you guys for tuning in. Again, this is episode 8, Setting Boundaries. Thank you all for tuning into this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave comments, thoughts, opinions, feedback on what you guys got from this episode or what you thought about it. Our goal with Inspiring the Ideals is to promote self-love, self-esteem, and women empowerment. We are striving to dismantle jealousy, competition, and confrontation amongst young women. You can follow us on all of our social media sites, SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes Podcast, and Google Play at Inspiring the Ideals Podcast. Our website is www.alegacybeyondlegendary.com, and you can email me at razia@alegacybeyondlegendary.com. If you are looking to be a candidate for co-hosting question and answers and/or interviews, please let us know by sending an email. If you are a business owner looking for promotional outlets and/or would like to feature on our show, please let us know by sending an email. Again, y'all, this is Inspiring the Ideals with Razia. Stay tuned. Peace, y'all.